This is the DualSense controller. Currently, is the only controller with adaptive triggers. But this is about to change. Enter the Flydigi Apex 3. Hello everyone! Today we're gonna review the Flydigi Apex 3. The box is entirely in Chinese, but we can still see some information here. It has a hybrid D-pad, a fully colored LCD display, force feedback triggers, and Mecha-Tactile Buttons. And it's compatible with the Nintendo Switch, smartphones, and PC. In the box we get a letter, which is entirely in Chinese. Here's a quick translation with Google Translate. In the box you'll get the controller, a braided USB Type-C cable, and a 2.4 GHz dongle. Here you have the manuals and some stickers. The manual is in Chinese, so there's no point in trying to translate that. You also get these blades, which I'll show what they are used for later. And here's the Apex 3 charging dock. It doesn't come bundled with the controller, you have to buy it separately, keep that in mind. Well, in the box you get just the dock. In the back you have two ports. I'll explain these later too. The dock has magnets which will pull the controller towards the charging pins. You can see them here. And the dock holds the controller pretty well. It's hard to knock it off. Now let's take a look at the controller. The first thing you'll note is this elevated D-pad and the charging connectors here. In the back you have 4 shortcut buttons. And in the top you have the shoulder buttons and triggers. Compared with the previous model, the Apex 2, the Apex 3 lost the C and Z buttons, as well as the sliding buttons mechanism. Ergonomically, it looks the same, with the same rubberized grips in the back of the controller. And in the top, it also lost the M4 and M5 buttons. Here's the comparison with the Xbox Series X controller. So yeah, they are pretty identical. And comparing the D-pads, you can see how elevated the Apex 3 is. The D-pad on the Xbox controller is quite noisy. But on the Apex 3, it is much more silent. And here is the Mecha-Tactile Buttons. They feel completely different from regular buttons. I'd say that they are more similar to mechanical keyboard switches. There is a small travel distance, then there's the click, and then there's another small travel distance. Just like a mechanical switch. The analog sticks and D-pad are removable. And the front shell of the controller is detachable. But this time, it is held by magnets. The rumble motors are exposed, which is quite cool as you can see them through the transparent front shell. This Flydigi front plate is removable, and this is why you receive the extra front plates. They come with this tool, which you can use to scratch the plate and make your own design. And then you can insert in the controller and let the light shine through. I tried making the logo for VK's channel, but the tool isn't quite adequate. It removes too much material, making it hard to add details. So after a few failed attempts, I finally got it right with a thinner tool. Another cool detail is that the Flydigi mascot will react depending on your inputs. And the stickers are meant to be placed inside the shell. and they can be removed without leaving any residue. The analog sticks have the same rotating metal ring present on other Flydigi controllers. The rings will make rotating motions really smooth and also protect the body of the stick. Let's test the analog sticks and D-pad. Here's the circularity test. A good point is that it has no dead zones in the axis. And the diagonals on the D-pad are easily accessed. But if you press really hard in the center, all the directions will be activated. This is not ideal as it can mess your inputs, especially on fighting games. This does not happen in the Apex 2. It doesn't happen in the Vader 2 Pro. And it also doesn't happen in the Xbox controller. The triggers are analog triggers as expected. The dock has two ports, one USB Type-C and one USB-A. Both ports can provide power to charge your controller, but if you connect to your computer through USB Type-C, the USB Type-A port will work as a pass-through port. So you can connect pretty much anything to this port and it will work fine. So you can connect the 2.4 GHz dongle and leave it there. So when you pick your controller and turn it on, you have a wireless, low latency connection, without the need to use another port on your computer. On your smartphone, you can use the Flydigi Game Center app. And this app is just amazing. You can update your controller and edit the lighting modes. It is also capable of turning your controller inputs in touches on the screen. It turns any mobile game into a console experience. I covered this app in full detail on my Vader 2 and Apex 2 review. Check the card in the top right corner if you want to see that. You can even use motion controls to aim. On your PC, you can download the Flydigi Game Center. On the Game Center, you can change the display settings. Change the standby time, and display a status bar, which is only available in the default setting. And you can also upload your own GIF file. I used that to make the intro of this video, but you can pretty much customize with any GIF you want. The only complaint that I have is that the upload process is pretty slow. You can also change settings for the PC mode, Switch mode, and iOS mode. Through the Game Center, you can edit 4 presets. You can switch between them by pressing Select and A, B, X or Y buttons. You can change the vibration intensity, select different color modes, remap any button you want, adjust the sensitivity of the analog sticks, you can tie the motion controls to the left or right sticks to do motion aiming in games that don't support it. And exclusively to the Apex 3, there is the trigger configuration. General is turned off. Racing will give the triggers a small resistance, similar to stepping on a paddle. Auto mode will simulate a machine gun. And Sniper will simulate a barrier in the middle of the travel. You can edit all of the configurations. You can even simulate a trigger stop by putting on the racing mode, turning the strength to max, and then select the starting position. The triggers will be really hard after the point you select. Another point to keep in mind is that the triggers will activate before the force feedback. So to change that, you should select this option. And now the triggers will activate only when the force feedback kicks in. Now let's talk about the adaptive triggers. On PC, there is a small list of games that already support the DualSense triggers. On these games, all you have to do is plug the DualSense and the adaptive triggers will work right away. But plugging the Apex 3 won't work with these games. That's because these games are coded to work with the DualSense only, and the DualSense have some encrypted data from Sony, preventing other companies from copying it. This is why you don't see third-party controllers compatible with the PS5. They may work with the PS5 but only on PS4 games. So Flydigi had to find a workaround for this. The way they did it was to add the adaptive triggers themselves. On the PC Space program, you'll see the adaptive triggers option. And here is the current list of supported games. Currently, the adaptive triggers of the Apex 3 will work only with these games, but Flydigi will update and add more games in the future. Sadly, the only game of this list that I have is Resident Evil 7. When you activate the adaptive triggers, the program will mod the game files. Then you can start the game and play normally. And as you can see here, the adaptive triggers do work. With the X equipped, the triggers will be heavy. But if I change to the gun, the triggers will act like a gun trigger. By pressing the home button, you can change the settings of the controller. Everything is in Chinese, but it's easy to understand. The first option is for the different connection modes. The second one is for the controller presets. The third one will change the brightness of the screen. The fourth resets the controller. And the last ones are for the update version and a QR code, presumably for the app. On the Nintendo Switch, the controller can wake up the device. And the force feedback works here too. It's quite nice to play Splatoon with it. But as expected, the triggers are not adaptive, meaning that they won't respond if you change your weapon. So you must manually change the preset depending on the weapon you're using. Since on Splatoon you don't change your weapon in the middle of the match, it is okay. You change your weapon, change the preset, and play a match. But on other games where you can change your weapon in the middle of the combat, this is not viable. Moving to the teardown, we have 4 Torx screws in the face of the controller. Flydigi gamepads are built like tanks. I had cut myself on the Flydigi Apex 2 and Vader 2 teardown, and this one also took a piece of me. The construction is very solid and it's full of clips all around the controller. You have 2 here, 2 on each side, and after removing all of them, you can get inside. When opening, be careful with this flat cable. Here's a look at the battery contacts for the charger. And you can also see the magnets for the dock. The back buttons are located on this PCB, and the battery is of 1500 mA, which is good as the force feedback triggers will spend more energy. On the other side, we have the main body of the controller. You can see the power switch and the motors for the triggers. There is a potentiometer here. But on the other side, it looks like this is a magnet and this is Hall effect triggers. And by placing a screw, I can confirm these are indeed magnets. So these triggers must have Hall effect sensors. But why is there a potentiometer on the other side of each trigger? They don't move when I press the trigger, so it must be something else. On the other side of the board, you can see the switches for the Mecha-Tactile Buttons. They are high quality KL switches, and they are slightly different from the switch you would find on a regular mouse. The analog sticks are potentiometer based, and the brand is Alps. On the D-pad, you have clicky switches, and they are not dome switches, they are button switches, which is more resistant and easy to replace. The actual D-pad has a quite interesting mechanism. It is pivoted in 2 axes, and it moves freely on these 2 axes. I believe that the problem here is that the center pivot is not in the correct height. So when you press in the center, it won't stop you from hitting all 4 switches. Here's why these buttons are called Mecha-Tactile Buttons. They have rubber membranes and clicky switches. With the controller disassembled, pressing the buttons feels like any normal controller with rubber membranes. But when assembled, these rubbers will push the switches you saw before, giving you the mixed feeling of the rubber membranes on a controller with the clicky response of the mechanical switches. The display is on the front of the shell, and it communicates by attaching these pins to the board. Here's the slot which they connect to. And here's the antennas for the wireless signal. They're located in the best possible point in the top of the controller. The shoulder buttons have a rubber protection too. This will dampen the pressure on the switch. With the controller turned on, we can see the force feedback on the triggers. This time, we can see the potentiometers working. So, I believe that the potentiometers are to indicate at what point the motors should be activated. You can see that they only turn on when the potentiometers reach a certain point. And here you can see that the triggers are indeed magnetic. The tip of my screwdriver is magnetic, and when I approach it to the triggers, you can see the numbers changing. And now for my final thoughts on the Apex 3. Well, this is complicated. The Apex 3 is a solid controller, there is no denying it. The great build quality, Mecha-Tactile Buttons, and adaptive triggers are big features that currently no other controller have. However, compared with the previous model, the Apex 2, it feels like a step back. It doesn't have Flydigi's trademark shortcut buttons C and Z that even the Vader 2 Pro has. And even the M4 and M5 buttons close to the triggers are missing. The amazing sliding buttons feature is also missing on this one. Sure, having everything would increase the cost, but I believe that the package of the Apex 2 offered so much more, with the carrying case, the smartphone clip, and the extra analog sticks. It is a complete package. The removable front plate is a huge improvement on the Apex 2, and it's so much better and reliable, as the magnets will never break compared with the plastic clips of the Apex 2, but they missed the opportunity to allow the dongle to be inserted inside the controller. The Apex 2 have this feature, so why not keep it on this one? The dongle is also much bigger this time. The screen looks nice, and it really helps when you have to change modes. It's more intuitive, and you don't have to keep pressing button combinations and look at LEDs. But other than that, it doesn't offer anything to enhance gameplay experience. It would be really nice if the screen could show extra information depending on the game you're playing, just like the Dreamcast controller. But that would have to be a huge time-consuming process from Flydigi, as games aren't developed with this functionality in mind. And about the triggers, it also has its problems. Since the DualSense adaptive trigger data is encrypted, unless someone finds a way to decrypt it and make that work with the Apex 3, it will depend on Flydigi to keep updating the software, adding more games to the list. Meanwhile, future games on PC that are also available on PS5 will already have DualSense compatibility at day one, since companies already developed the game with that feature in mind. It is a fight that they cannot win. This time, the Apex 3 is compatible with the Nintendo Switch, but there is no capture button, meaning that if you want to capture screenshots or videos on the console, you must map that to one of the back buttons. Even the Vader 2 Pro has a capture button. I believe that Flydigi have named this controller wrong. If this was called the Vader 3, it would feel like an improvement, missing only the C and Z buttons and a capture function for the Switch. Perhaps we have a new queen of gamepads, but the king's crown is still with the Apex 2. And that's it for this review. I spent a lot of time and added all the details I could. It would help me out a lot if you could share this video on gaming groups or to a friend, and subscribe to the channel. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.